Good evening, everybody. This is Katrina Ole-MoiYoi from Caring, and I'm joined today by Chantsallkham from Mongolia, who's up very late tonight to tell us about some exciting work that we have together on the ground. So it's great to be here. Thank you for joining, and we're excited to begin. Shanta, I just want to double check and make sure that you're there and that everyone can hear you.
Hi, I'm here.
Great. Okay, so let's get started. So we want to spend the next 30 minutes really taking you on a journey to talk about why we care so much about regenerative materials in fashion and what that really means. And so we'll get into it, but we're talking about the birthplace of the materials that so many of us use. So wool, cashmere, cotton, and so on. We'll begin by giving an overview of why talk about raw materials at all, and then make some comments about this shift that you might have noticed that's underway in the industry towards regenerative agriculture and what that really means. And then I will be joined by Shansa to really do a deep dive on the South Gobi Kashmir project in Mongolia. Shansa is an ecologist by training, so it's really great to have her perspective. And she is the manager of the program, which has been running for about 5 years now. We'll then finish up by talking about how we can scale regenerative agriculture across the industry, as well as some key takeaways that we've learned together over many years. And then just one comment, which is that we would love to see what questions you have for us. So please post them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer as many of them as we can. Okay, so to kick off then, there's this question, why focus on raw materials? And I think for many fashion companies out there, there's this real question around, what are my environmental impacts and where are they biggest when I look across the supply chain? At Caring, we've been using a very pioneering tool called the Environmental Profit and Loss Account since 2012, and it really helps us to answer exactly that question. And so as you'll see here on the screen, I'm showing you the results from 2019. And what becomes obvious very quickly is that our largest environmental impacts are not in what we call tier 0. They're not in our stores or our warehouses or our offices where we have direct control, but they actually happen way back at the birthplace of these raw materials, which is in tier 4. And specifically, you can see there's this very large green bubble here, which is the environmental impact around land use. So how much land is used to produce all of the materials that end up in our supply chain, as well as greenhouse gases. And so this has been a very powerful tool for us because it's really helped us zoom in and figure out where we should prioritize action and programming. Now, I think many of our listeners have probably heard the term regenerative agriculture. I think that there are a lot of questions around what does that really mean? And at Caring, I think it's important to emphasize that it means something slightly different depending on the particular system you're talking about. And so regenerative agriculture in cotton will look very different than regenerative agriculture in wool farming, for instance. Now, what ties it all together, however, is that it takes a completely different approach to farming, which is instead of saying merely, let's try to minimize the negative impacts of agriculture, let's completely flip that paradigm on its head, and instead let's push for net positive impacts. How is that done? Well, as I mentioned, it depends on which particular type of farming you're talking about. And so there's a big emphasis, however, on the health of the soils. And a lot of regenerative agriculture begins with the health of the soils. And so a lot of it is around how do we keep carbon in the soils? How do we improve the water retention ability of the soils? And then in addition to that, it takes a very sort of holistic approach to farming and works to protect both soil biodiversity as well as the biodiversity off the farm. As well as crop biodiversity. And so there's a shift away from monocultures into growing a diversity of species. So I've mentioned that many in fashion are now making, I think, important strides into regenerative agriculture. And for those of you who also work outside of the industry, this shift is very much underway in the food sector as well. Just this year, we've seen millions and millions of dollars being poured into new funds that are being launched by the likes of Danone, Unilever, Nestle, and most recently Walmart as well. So it's a very exciting time to be in this field and to really ask the question, how do we transform what happens at the very beginning of the supply chain where all of our materials begin their lives? And so I thought it would be great to really bring this idea to life by having a conversation with Chansa, who's been managing, as I mentioned, this program that we run together in Mongolia that works on cashmere and specifically on cashmere farming. And so I would love to invite Chansa on and to kick off with a question around the context. And so Chansa, if you can just help the listeners understand, for those who are not aware, cashmere is this beautiful product that we all know and love very much, but I'm not sure if everyone is aware of the history of the cashmere industry and what's happened in Mongolia in the last few decades that you think has created a situation where we really needed to put programs in place on the ground. So over to you, Chansa.
Thank you, Katrina. And some of you may know where is Mongolia? Mongolia is the country located in the Central Asia in between Russia and China. And cashmere production in Mongolia is different than the cashmere production in different countries, especially like China. And because in Mongolia Mongolia has had a nomadic pastoral production system for at least 1,000 years and possibly as long as 4,000 years. And we Mongolians harvest cashmere from the goats graze in open rangeland, which is different than China, where cashmere is harvested from the farmed goats. And in the past 2 decades, the market demand for cashmere has increased and is focused on not the quality of cashmere, but rather on quantity of cashmere. In response to that, herders have increased their goats, and the number of goats has tripled over the last 3 decades. This has led to the degradation of rangeland. And at the same time, climate is changing in Mongolia. Soil surface temperature has increased for 2 Celsius, and which is greater than the global average. And precipitation pattern and the amount of precipitation has changed over the last 60 years. So when it comes to the biodiversity in the ecosystem, it's increasing livestock numbers compete with wildlife over habitat and forage resources, especially during winter, which is a very critical time of the year when both livestock and wild ungulates depend on standardized vegetation from the prior growing season. If you take this together, the increase of goat numbers and then the increase of the temperature and the changes in rainfall, you understand quickly that why there was a deteriorating rangeland condition on the ground. This in turn meant a decreased quality of livestock and livestock products. So with this situation, Soft Gobi Kashmir project has started in 2016 with the support from the Kering and also which also invested along with the following funding support from Untitled mine since 2017. So we work with 2 herder cooperatives in 2 districts of the southern province of Mongolia. And these 2 districts are located on the dry desert and semi-desert ecological zones where rainfall varies a lot, both spatially and temporally. And one of the cooperatives is quite large. You can see on the slide with over 100 families joined in this group. And another cooperative is quite small, about 21 herder member families. And then all together, we are working together to manage about 250 hectares of rangeland.
Okay, great, Chansa. And so I think that really leads to the next question, which is around what does grazing really look like on the ground? And how is it that that the owners of these cashmere goats figure out exactly where to move their goats over the course of the year?
Okay, so to understand the project, it helps also to know a little bit about the rangeland use in Mongolia. In Mongolia, rangelands are common access property, sorry. And as shown in this picture, during the winter and then springtime, rangeland use is very well defined and ruled by collective norms because it's a very critical time of the year. Livestock rely on this standardized vegetation. But the summer and autumn periods, however, herders have to move across wider areas, especially in the area where we work. It's arid rangelands, and that this when it comes to the water, accessing water, it's completely dependent on the water wells. And well access is legally public domain, but in practice, small groups of herders usually often control. In Mongolia, also rangeland use planning and implementation is poorly regulated and facilitated the government, especially in the local level. And it's because of due to human capacity and skills and also financial shortages. Herders' strategy under this, the unregulated or uncoordinated time with increasing livestock number was to gain the short-term benefits or at the expense of the long-term sustainability of rangeland uses. So, like we know that this is some form of the example of the tragedy of the commons problem. To get away from this and then also move towards more sustainable model, it requires a strong coordinated approach in developing rangeland use plan and its implementation so that it can help to improve the rangeland condition and improve the livestock quality. We think the herders play a very critical role in this, in this process and to disrupt this vicious downward cycle. So that's why our project really trying to bring all these herders on the table. You can see in the picture also, and discuss about what is the current problem, what will be the long-term effect if we continue like this, and then how we can change this practice, who can play the critical role. So that's why we are really trying to improve the awareness and knowledge about herders and then work towards the sustainable livestock production and sustainable cashmere production. And then in the long run, herders can actually really benefit from the quality, not from the quantity.
Okay, thanks. That's it's a really great summary. And I think that, as people become aware of the sort of the nuance around herding and the sort of the strategies that herders employ to find grass for their goats, I think is super helpful. So thanks for that. And the next question that I have for you is really about the role of WCS in all of this. You're an ecologist by training, and I know that you work with a lot of other scientists on your team. And so I thought it would be great if we could spend a couple of minutes just really talking about what does this look like on the ground? How is it exactly that you measure changes in the health of the ecosystem?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning before, we are really trying to bring all our cooperative herders on the table and then discuss, but also at some time we really want to bring back the real science-based information to be able to have better planning and then better implementation. So what we are really doing is do the rangeland monitoring every year in August, and we are with the collaboration of the Arthur Riley Institute from Australia, we developed the rangeland condition metric model. And when we do the rangeland monitoring, we collect the vegetation and then soil data, and then plug this information into this condition metric model. And then we get the number, which is very easy for all audiences to understand. And then the model provides us the number, and this number is continues from 0 being very bad or irreversibly degraded rangeland to the 100 being the very pristine good rangeland condition. And then we bring this information to our cooperative herders and then discuss and then help use this information to develop the rangeland use plan for following years. And in the picture, you can see the person who is lying on the land is me. Last year, we were collecting the data, and yeah, so this information actually really helps us to communicate, with the local government and to educate or to bring this information, what's happening, what is the state of the rangeland condition, how we can work, how we can improve, what level and what stage we should really take. And at some time also in the map, in this slide on the left hand, you can see we also did this rangeland use boundary by each our cooperative families, and then bringing this condition score, and then individual family level versus the cooperative level rangeland management planning is really it really uses this rangeland condition score. So that's what we are really trying to bring.
Great. No, it's really exciting stuff, and I think that from our side, I think it's a especially powerful partnership because it enables our brands to actually make a direct connection with the herders, and so there's a very clear relationship there when it comes to our sourcing and also helping invest in sustainable best practices on the ground. So it's really a great project, and we're excited to see what's next. But I think maybe before we get into that, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking about Karing's sort of work in this area. Some of the listeners might have seen that back in July, we launched our biodiversity strategy. And in that, we also made an announcement that we're starting a fund now in regenerative agriculture. And the whole idea here is to take some of the best practices and the learnings from the Mongolia project the Mongolia Kashmir project, and to scale that into other materials that have very high environmental impact when you look at our environmental profit and loss account, which I went over earlier. And so the idea here is really, when you talk about raw material producers at the beginning of the supply chain, and you are asking them to go on this journey into more sustainable practices, there's risk there. And we recognize that that requires funding and it requires partnerships. And so the whole purpose of this fund is to really walk with raw material producers on this journey, not just in Mongolia, but in many, many other countries around the world. So as I mentioned, we announced the fund in July. And we will start accepting applications for it in early 2021 with a focus on leather, cotton, cashmere, and wool. So this is a work in progress, and I would encourage people to just keep an eye on our website. We'll have a lot more information about this soon and how organizations and companies can apply if they're interested. Okay, we have a few more minutes, and so I thought we could just summarize some of the key takeaways from this work that we've been doing in partnership with WCS. And then maybe if we have time, we'll take a question or two. So to begin with, I think there's this question around understanding your sourcing if you're a fashion company. Where is it that your raw materials come from? And what are the environmental impacts of those materials? Because that really helps drive smart investments in sustainable practices. The second point, and I think Shansa has illustrated this really well, is the importance of patience. So it takes a long time to see environments change and to measure that change on the ground. And so these are the types of projects that you can't parachute in for 1 year and expect to see really positive improvements. It requires a long-term partnership and continuous investment. The third point is around certainty and risk. As I mentioned, herders and other raw material producers carry a lot of risk. And so the extent to which brands can provide offtake agreements and long-term sustainable partnerships really goes a long way. Shansa, I think, has also illustrated this point very well, which is the importance of working with scientific communities, NGO partners, and so on, because the work that we're talking about that has to happen on the ground really requires a very rigorous approach. And then finally, and this is, I think, the call that we would really make to other brands out there is that we should work together to consider co-investing in these types of projects at the beginning of the supply chain in a pre-competitive way. Ultimately, we're all sourcing very similar materials from similar landscapes. And if we're able to, join hands and really drive this change on the ground, that's a fantastic thing. And it's something that we're very receptive to. Okay, I'm going to turn over to my other screen over here, so forgive me, please. But I've been watching questions as they come in. The first question is for Shantsa, which is what are the next sort of steps for the project, and where do you see it going in the next few years?
Okay, great question. So we actually developed this rangeland metric, and then we are trying to, the quantitatively, assess the rangeland condition. And the next is we are really trying to connect this information with the standard or certification, the measures, because for the brands, it's also required, they need the documentation evidence, more proven or the written evidence. And for herders also, for them to demonstrate or display how they are really, trying to improve the rangeland condition, improve the resources so that they can, in the long run, they can get the better income from their efforts. So next step is work towards the sustainability standards and then connect with the standards, with the quality of Kashmir, with the quality of rangeland. So these are our next step. Before that, it's really, as also Katrina mentioned, like to pave the road, we really need to have a good foundation. So this is the social outcome, ecological outcome, and the economic outcome. But the social outcome is the very first thing. Building the trust among the herders, sharing the common resources is very critical. And the second one is how we can, collaboratively reach to the better market. So that's how we are really working toward.
That's great. No, that's super helpful. And I think I might add that cashmere is a very unique material because unlike cotton or wool, as you've mentioned, the idea of a common sort of standard is still very much under development. And so for those who work in the space often, there are a lot of conversations right now around what does sustainable cashmere really mean? And that's a really critical question because sometimes brands don't necessarily have huge teams of people who are able to really dig in. And so the faster that we can move towards a universally recognizable standard around sustainable cashmere is really something that can help propel the industry forward. So thank you for that. The next question is that's one that's a bit more for Caring, which is, and there are a couple of questions that sort of get at the same thing, so I'll just try to group them as best as I can, which is how do you select partners to do this type of work? And so, when Caring goes to Mongolia to work in cashmere or to Australia to work in wool, how is it that we really identify partners? And as I mentioned earlier, I think that each geography and each material is very different and it requires a different type of expertise. And so our approach is to really just figure out who is leading the way in the space when it comes to sustainability. And we match that, again, back to our EP&L to look at where the impacts are greatest so that we can make investment decisions accordingly. And then I guess the last point is that I'll link that to the Caring for Nature Fund. We will select particular countries and align them with particular materials that we'd really like to focus on. And so we're really excited to see applications, of course, from the usual players, but we're also really excited to see who else is out there in the world doing exciting work in regenerative agriculture that we can potentially partner with. Okay, and then I think one more question, which is around communication to the consumer. So the question is, how is all of this information communicated to the consumer? And I think that obviously I work at Caring, And that type of communication is very brand specific in our case. And so if you were to go to Gucci or Saint Laurent or Balenciaga, they all have a very different approach to how they engage their consumers. I think that they're, oftentimes information about programs like this at Caring is at sort of the Caring level. And so I'd invite you to dig around on our sustainability page on the Caring website. There's a lot of very rich content there, not only on the Mongolia program, but on many other programs that we have around the world. Okay, I think that those are the main questions that we were able to answer before we run out of time. I see that the clock is ticking. And so, Chansa, any last words for the listeners?
Yeah, it is a very great opportunity to bring what we are really trying to achieve and working on the ground. And thanks for the questions. And this is really great opportunity for us to collaborate with Caring and then bringing this changes toward the sustainable production pathway.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. I know it's already past midnight out in Mongolia. So it's been a real treat to have you here. And thank you again. And thank you everyone who joined. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to CFS Plus. Thanks to everyone from joining around the world. My name is Amina Razvi. I'm the Executive Director of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and it's great to be here. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Kate Heiny, to chat about standardizing sustainability and collaborating across the industry for impact. Kate, great to chat with you, as always.
Hi, Amina. Really happy to be here and get to spend the next 30 minutes with you as well. So thank you. As you said, I'm Kate Heiny, and I lead the sustainability work at Zalando.
Great. We have a lot to chat about, so let's get started. 2020 has been quite a year. We've heard throughout sessions at CFS Plus how this is a real pivotal moment for the industry. The crisis has accelerated systemic problems within the industry and has raised awareness for sustainability among consumers and stakeholders. Customers are really looking to better understand what the brands that they buy from are doing with regards to people and the planet. They're increasingly asking more questions about sustainability, and they tell companies that it can be difficult and confusing to understand what sustainability and performance really means due to hundreds of certificates, labels, and initiatives that are on the global market. And that's why the SAC was founded and the Higg Index created, to standardize sustainability measurement and performance so that ultimately consumers can make more informed decisions about their purchases based on trusted, credible, and comparable data. The Higg Index gives brands, retailers, and manufacturers a common standard, a global one, to assess social and environmental impacts of their supply chains and their products, such as water use, carbon emissions, and labor conditions. And it helps them to identify opportunities for improvement. For those who might be less familiar with the Higg Index, it includes a core set of 5 tools, facility and product tools, as well as the Higg brand and retail module, or the Higg BRM, which launched in March and provides brands and retailers with a comprehensive way to assess and communicate their social and environmental performance. The Higg BRM helps companies to understand their performance across 11 environmental and 16 social impact areas, and allows them to measure progress as they improve year over year. It provides a way to credibly track, measure, and drive impact reduction and point to opportunities for improvement. It also allows companies to share their sustainability progress with value chain partners, with consumers, with customers, investors, and stakeholders. Given the urgency and the scope of the challenges that we face, we need to reduce redundancy, and the industry needs to scale the use of these standardized tools, which when used globally, will help to drive collective action and accelerate transparency efforts. If we want to address customer demand and support a shift towards more sustainable purchasing, it's clear that the industry needs to speak in one voice and avoid confusion for both brands and customers. Kate, at Zalando, you guys have launched an impressive sustainability strategy, establishing yourselves as real leaders in the industry, and you've made a bold commitment to leveraging the Higg Index as an integral part of your strategy. In fact, you're the first retailer to make the Higg BRM a requirement for the brands that you sell on your platform. What motivates you guys to take a leadership position like this?
Well, Amina, I think that's a great question to start on. As Europe's leading destination for fashion, we at Zalando want to leverage the role that we play there and play within the industry in order to reduce confusion and create transparency for our customers so that we can enable them, as well as us, to make more sustainable choices moving forward. We're committed to working closely with our partner brands and to continuously raise the bar by pushing for better social and environmental standards like you just listed. So that's why with the launch of our Do More strategy last October, and then more recently, we made sustainability assessments, ethical and sustainability kind of environmental parameters for our brand partners mandatory. And by 2023, we will only work with partners who align with our ethical standards. We implemented the brand assessment on the basis of the Higg brand and retail module, the BRM, and I know we'll talk mostly about that, to assess the sustainability efforts of our own footprint, but also those of our partner brands as well. Because our vision at Zalando is to be a sustainable fashion platform with a net positive impact for people on the planet. And we see our partnership with the SAC as key to driving our strategy.
That's amazing. And it's so great to see all the work that I know that you guys have done and put into getting to this point. When you leverage the Higg BRM, ultimately, what do you hope that it's going to achieve, not only for Zalando as a company, but also for the brand partners that you're engaging with on this journey?
Well, for the first time, and again, you mentioned this, but I think I will strive to make this clear repeatedly throughout this, this time, is that this will be the first time that we have comparable sustainability data at a brand level in order to understand where our partners are with regards to sustainability performance. The next steps will be to identify the areas where we're struggling as an industry in order to drive collective action and impact. But first, we need comparable data in order to make any of those moves. So ultimately, we wanted to make this information visible for our customers who are already asking for this type of information. As you probably know, and I know Amina, you know, that we already highlight sustainability information to our customers at a product level through the sustainability flag, but that focuses specifically on sustainable materials or processing techniques. So we have a dedicated digital experience sustainability team that is testing ways to show more types of sustainability information to our customers, because our customers are also saying that they want brand level information. But that information needs to be easy to understand and comparable in order to help our customers make informed decisions that they say they want to be making.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you and I have both taken a look at the Higg BRM. We know it, well, and it's not necessarily an easy lift for companies. So, tell us a little bit about how have your brand partners responded? It's a big commitment. You're asking a lot of them. So, what's been the response so far?
You're right. It's so overwhelmingly, the response has been positive. So we see that across the board from both sustainability experts, but also to the commercial teams within these brands. And everyone agrees that they see the value and they're willing to work together on this. But like you said, it's also not a small questionnaire. I mean, sustainability is complicated. This covers a lot of ground. So it's not a small questionnaire, and the implementation won't happen overnight. And the concerns that we have heard have been around timelines and how our partners can get support in order to ensure that they are successful in completing the questionnaire. Especially right now, as we know this year, as you mentioned, but as we're all very clear on, this year has been challenging with the coronavirus crisis. So that adds an added complexity in terms of successful completion. But we're providing specific guidance and training, and we're expecting brands to show improvement on a year-over-year basis. Of course, Zalando has also filled out the questionnaire for our own labels. And this is a huge journey for all of us. It's not something that we are pushing off just for our brand partners. It's also something that we are doing. And it will be an obligation for any brand that sells on Zalando. Any brand that refuses to engage in these initiatives will ultimately be delisted from the platform, because with this, we're willing to take short-term loss for long-term gain, since we believe that our commitment to sustainability promises to be a source of competitive advantage, both for us and for our partners within the industry.
Yeah, it's definitely a bold leadership stance that you guys have taken. The SEC was really rooted in pre-competitive collaboration. And over the past 10 years, we've worked with all of our member companies to develop the Higg Index methodology. And it's really been about how do you help companies embark on this journey, as you mentioned, right? Like starting someplace and moving forward, while also really maintaining strong business relationships and increasing that engagement, across their value chain. But for those companies who haven't started, it isn't always easy, right? So what advice, are you guys giving to your brand partners, or would you give to other brands out there that are really new to the sustainability journey and are just getting started? How do they leverage tools like the Higg Index to really just start this journey?
Well, first off, you can't improve what you don't measure. I think that's an adage that we all know, right? We all know that really well, but you can't. I mean, just because we know it doesn't mean it's not correct. So you can't improve what you don't measure. So fill out the BRM, because it will help evaluate your brand's sustainability performance and show where improvements need to be made. And it will do it in a way that, again, allows you to compare or have comparable information across your competitors or perhaps brands within the same portfolio that you're in. So you can't measure, or you can't improve what you don't measure. Fill out the BRM, because it will help you understand what those measurements are in your performance. And cliche but true, again, it's a journey and no brand is perfect. So I say that in this context because, again, first time we've had comparable data, we're just starting, but we have to start somewhere. And so we all see this as a journey. And when we talk about that with our partners, I think that really helps us all to share that knowledge and understand that this is a long-term commitment that will help your business in creating value. And the more brands that use the tool, the more we can continue to evolve and improve them, because there is a feedback loop that helps to improve that. It's designed that way. And that is how we can drive collective impact and action. So please join. I'll do a sales pitch for you, Amina.
Oh, thank you, Kate. It makes my job a lot easier. You've talked about this a couple times, but I think it's so important, right? Where the HIG BRM for the first time is going to allow for this industry-wide comparable data to be collected, at a global scale. It's available for you guys as a retailer to really look at your portfolios, for individual brands, et cetera. But I want to kind of click into that a little bit to talk about why data comparability is so important for transformation across the industry, right? The crisis hit and we've all realized that we need to fundamentally change how things are done. And why, I just want to kind of click into why having that comparable data as a starting point is so important for the kind of transformation we're really seeking.
I think I'll answer this in a couple ways, actually. So something that we haven't really talked a lot about yet is our customer. And our customer, over 34 million of them, are asking for information about brands. And sort of this saying that we've seen and we repeat is, I don't want to buy a good product from a bad brand. Well, as a platform that carries over 2,500 brands, how are we supposed to provide that information? Because I cannot stress this enough, we need comparable data. So there's the need for us as a company, but we're doing this on behalf of our customers. So let's not lose sight of the fact that our customers are making choices to purchase more sustainable products, and they want to do that from more sustainable brands and companies. So we need comparable data. And specifically in this conversation, we need it at a brand level. So for us and for our partner brands, in order to identify improvement areas and work on solutions collaboratively. The SAC is an independent and globally structured organization that's positioned to drive the necessary change in the fashion industry. So that's why we partner with you. That's why, we're aligned on this. And that's why we've been doing this for the past, at least Zalando, for 3 years, but also you've been harder at work on this for a little bit longer. But in order to standardize sustainability communication and data comparability, to reduce confusion, to create greater transparency, and to enable both customers and businesses to make the more sustainable choices moving forward. So again, our customers are asking us for this. We need to make changes ourselves and our partners, and we can only do that collectively if we have the comparable data to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We have a couple of minutes before we get to Q&A, but I want to kind of build on that last point you made, right, about this really collaborating across the value chain to drive systemic change. We have 10 years left to really start to address some of the most pressing issues that we face, whether it's around climate, social labor issues, et cetera. And we can only really do those if we work together at a global scale. So can we click up a little bit and talk about why collaboration at that level and that scale is really necessary and the imperative for that right now.
Yeah, I mean, you just said it. We don't have time. 10 years is probably even generous, right? So we have to work together at a global scale. And I mean, I just feel like a broken record, but this is an established global standard for fashion brands and retailers in order to measure and talk about our performance. We need industry alignment and collaboration. And I think we have a lot of that through the SAC and the efforts that are being driven through the work that you lead. So we need to speak with one language towards customers. More retailers, we would ask more and more retailers or platforms to start using this tool for your third-party assessments as well. But the apparel industry is a significant contributor, like you mentioned, to environmental and social impacts. And brands in particular must take bold leadership in order to achieve meaningful improvements in the industry. We have to do it together. So we clearly see that we cannot wait for regulator requirements, and we need to act now, and we need to scale our available solutions globally.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better. I know that you and I could probably talk about this for a while, for sure, which we have at length. But we also want to make sure that we take some time to address questions from the audience. Our teams have been collecting questions over the course of our discussion, so we want to dive into some of those questions right now. One of the questions I want to start with is around technology and data. So how do you believe technology and data can really help fashion retailers and brands be more sustainable?
Absolutely. Well, I think it's pretty clear that we live in a digital world, and we see digitization continuing to grow, especially now as we are increasingly connecting with one another from remote locations, so across the world almost. But moving forward, the apparel industry will increasingly rely on technology, innovation, data. Fashion retailers are often in a great position to actually pilot and scale these efforts. So yes, I think that this technology and data can help us, and the BRM is our way of gathering that data right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that's come in around brands encouraging value chain partners to collaborate on sustainability initiatives. Prior to your work at Zalando, you worked at another big brand, and so much of the work that you and I have both done is around how do we actually partner across the value chain to really collaborate on sustainability initiatives. So from all of your roles, what would you say are, what are the ways in which to engage, partner, and really collaborate more deeply that are necessary right now?
Well, I think something you said actually in your opening around pre-competitive work. There's so much to be done. There's so much that we have to align on and actually work together on before we even get to a point of competition. So I think what I just sort of kind of continue to double down on encouraging us to measure for the first time in order to have the ability to have discussions and in a common language and compare ourselves. I mean, having the tool of the BRM really helps us to do that. The SAC clearly provides a few different options of tools, but I'd also be curious if you've heard of other examples or anything that, I know you're running the Q&A, but if you interact with a lot more than even I do. So if you have other ideas or suggestions.
Yeah, I want to build on that point that you made around having those common tools and those standards really being a starting point for conversations. For a lot of the member companies that we engage with, these tools actually help them to do that, right? They help them to engage with their, not only, customers, with their supply chain partners, but to really say, this is what we're seeing, right? This is kind of where things are landing. How do we then use that as a jumping off point for a conversation around how we improve performance and how we do that together? So, when you think about the HIG facility tools or the HIG BRM tools, they can also be tools to really drive increased engagement, to drive equal partnership, to drive greater collaboration, and to come up with solutions that ultimately benefit the entire value chain. So I think that those are really important. Starting off with a common language is key, but then using that to build off of, to deepen those conversations and those collaborations about really driving improved performance. Another question that we've gotten is pretty interesting around, is profitability a key barrier for sustainable fashion? Always an interesting one when we talk about, what does it take? What does it cost? Is sustainability profitable? But would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I guess I'd point to customers for this one, right? So, I mean, profitability is kind of the key here, is what are our customers telling us? And at Zalando, our sustainability ambitions will help us to stay ahead of customer demand. Both our current and our future customer base are calling for more sustainable fashion choices. We know that 9 out of 10 Gen Z consumers believe that companies have a responsibility to address environmental and social issues. And we believe that by committing to sustainability, we can secure our long-term growth, stay relevant with our customers, and establish market-leading differentiation against our competitors. So we fundamentally see this as the future of our business model, and we don't separate out the sort of commercial success from sustainability success.
Yeah, no, it's a great point.
That the winners in the future will, be sustainable organizations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that even from what we're seeing, across our member companies, those companies that are really doubling down on sustainability efforts are the ones who are making progress, who are, I think, ultimately going to be resilient as we come out of the crisis. So it's a great point. One of the questions coming in is around minimum standards. Have you guys really thought about moving beyond just requiring it to saying, okay, well, the brands that we sell on our platform need to meet some minimum standards or thresholds. And will you guys disclose those eventually, or have you even gotten that far?
Thanks for that last part. We have not gotten that far. So as you said, as we all know, this is brand new. So we just launched the use of the BRM this year. It's our first year, and so it's really about understanding where our partners are with regard to sustainability performance, being able to identify the areas where we're struggling as an industry, but also specific partners perhaps. And it's in order to leverage our position as a platform, then we will be able to focus on collective action and impact. So let's see, it's October. So just this past month, we received our first kind of round of data coming in from the first cohort of brands that include partners like Nike, VF Corp, and PVH. And we will assess and analyze that first batch of data this month and next. So our aim is absolutely to scale this the standard, this tool, and take the lead on ahead of future regulatory frameworks that might come to bear. Like I said, in order to drive impact. So brands that don't engage on this or fail to show progress, we will not work with. We will only work with brands that align with our standards in this space. And so I won't repeat everything I just said, but I think in terms of disclosure of the HIG, not necessarily the results, but the HIG data and information. And I don't know if maybe you want to say something about that from the SAC perspective. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. In terms of our transparency efforts, it is something that the SAC, it's been a core part of our work. Actually, there's going to be a session tomorrow at CFS Plus around transparency and where transparency is headed. But this is definitely on our roadmap to, by 2021, be able to start communicating around, performance and looking at it from a high level industry perspective, and to be able to allow companies to communicate communicate their performance as well. So, we've talked about the importance of transparency. It's clear that we need to move in that direction, and we're working really hard with all of our member companies to activate that. We have just another probably maybe time for one more question that's come in. I think it's probably for both of us, but we alluded earlier to the fact that this is not a small questionnaire. The companies that you mentioned that have already completed it are pretty big ones, right? So I guess it'd be great to hear from your perspective, is this really a tool for companies of all sizes to be able to leverage? And, with all of the brands that you sell, I'd be curious to hear what some of the smaller companies, how they have found their engagement with it, as we move forward.
Yeah, you're right. It is probably a question for both of us. I mean, you're right. The ones I listed are fairly large. And we have had positive, like I said, positive responses overall. So for the breadth of the partners that we've identified, I think that in terms of the smaller organizations, right now, what we're hearing the most is how can we best support them? And what are the, what is the training or what are the tools of support that they can have in order to be able to fill this out and to be able to get some actionable data? That's really we need to work together kind of across the different ecosystem to help everyone be able to fill out the questionnaire and then access and use the data as well.
Yeah. And I might just build on that with, you mentioned this at the beginning that like these tools are always evolving, right? And a really important part of this is feedback. We did create these tools to ensure that companies of all sizes could really dig into it, but we know that they need to evolve and we need to continue to make sure we're getting that feedback so that we can support companies to actually, enter their information, but also to evolve the tool to meet user needs. So it's a work in progress as always. So we have so many more questions coming in, and I wish we could answer them all, but we have just a few minutes to wrap up. And as we wrap up today's session, Kate, what would you say are two of your kind of key takeaways and kind of your call to action for other brands and retailers out there?
Well, I guess first and foremost is, I think, this point about not waiting for regulation or to be enforced or to be have another hand kind of tell us what to do. We need to take action and we need to do it now. You mentioned 10 years. I think we both agreed that's probably not, we don't have that much time. So we can't wait for regulation. We need to take some bold action now is the first point. Second, and this is really around the collective impact, we need to speak to customers in one language. So again, comparability, one language, reduce confusion, create transparency. We need to be able to align around this so that we're sharing the same messages so that people understand them so that we can have the collective impact and improvement that we all want. Amina, what are your two?
For me, I think we've talked about this a lot, but really it's about scaling these standardized tools. We have tools that can be used right now and deployed. And we don't have time to wait. We both agree on that, right? We know that the tools aren't perfect. They're going to continue to evolve, but I think it's really important to get started wherever companies are at with their journey. And then to really scale the use of these tools across the industry. If we have all companies leveraging a similar set of tools with similar standards, we can actually start to use that information to drive real reduction of impact. And that's the point here, right? Like that's what we're all trying to get to. So I think it's so important. And without that scale, we're not going to be able to do that. So those are my two key takeaways. And I think, Kate, you and I would both agree that our call to action is that we want to make sure that everyone's using the HIG brand and retail module and other standard tools like this to really, really drive the industry forward. With that, I want to say thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to talk and to thank Global Fashion Agenda for the platform to talk about this. And to everyone joining us today, thank you for all your questions. And thank you very much for tuning in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. And Amina, thanks for leading a great session. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.